This is Tony Mark
This is Russell Grether
of the Mark and Grether Group, and welcome to the Malibu Podcast.
Malibu, 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 Malibu.
Thanks for joining us and being on the Malibu Podcast. Since we are primarily Malibu realtors and our podcast is supposed to be centered on that subject, we wanted to interview you, our friend Stephany from Chartwell Escrow, to try to understand the escrow process. I have been in real estate about as long as you've been in escrow, I think, right?
Yeah, probably.
I was my dad's assistant back at Fred Sands in 1994, I think.
Yeah,
And
I
then
started in
you were-
92.
Okay. And then you were working with Cynthia over at, what company would that have been?
It was Fred Sands at the time. I
So
started
Fred Sands had
there
its own escrow?
in 90. I started in that office in 98.
So you were legendary back then because everyone thought you were amazing, but you also lived and worked rock star hours. So
Pretty much, yeah.
I'd come in at my semi rock star hours at 10 o'clock because I'd been up working late for my dad, and I'd get in and you'd be out still, sleeping in your car, literally. And Cynthia's house, and Cynthia would be like, "Hey, she's the best employee of all time. She worked all night. Leave her alone."
Yeah.
So we were all.
We would work till 2 in the morning, 3 in the morning. I just did that last week too. Tuesday night, I was there until 2:30 in the morning.
So I learned early on that escrow officers were way smarter than real estate agents, worked way harder. And if I ever had a question about anything, I'd generally come to you guys. But even after a gazillion years of being in real estate, I don't truly understand all the ins and outs of what escrow does. And so we thought it would be cool to just go through it with you as kind of an informational question and answer about the escrow process. So I know a lot of people think that, escrow, when they buy a house, they're going to sit down at a table with a lawyer. And I guess that's more of an East Coast transaction process. So is the way you do escrow in California, is that kind of standard for an escrow? Is that different than a table closing on the East Coast anywhere in California, or is it more unique to LA County?
I feel like it's more unique to LA County. I'm more familiar with LA County, but I know in Northern California, they still have escrow and title are kind of the same thing, and they go in and they sign their stuff all at one time.
So what would be kind of the life process of, from the time our buyer brings an offer in, we have an offer accepted, and you open escrow? What would be kind of the process roughly?
So from right when I get it, I go through it, I see what's missing from the contract, what blanks do I need to fill in. So then, I send a quick email out, and then while I'm waiting for those answers, I'll get the title order opened, unless one of the questions is what title company are we using. We'll get the NHD ordered from the disclosure company, unless it doesn't say which NHD company, but
typical
where I'm going
contract.
with that. But yeah, so we get all the information entered, and then we do supplemental instructions that are kind of, they run along with the contract, just as to the items from the title company. We order everything we have to get from them, the disclosures, we send out wire instructions for the deposit through secure manner, through secure channels, which is a different conversation, but and then just while all that stuff is going on, we're plugging away at getting in additional information from the buyer and the seller, how do you want to take title, do you have any payoffs, what's the loan number, and we order those payoff statements for the seller. We send out documents to pay off lenders if they don't have like a reconveyance for a loan that's already paid off, or, we kind of help clean up the title a little bit if it's a mess.
So when people ask me, my general answer of what escrow does is they're kind of like the neutral intermediary between the buyer and their money and the seller and their title, and kind of the person that helps make that transition, but as a neutral fiduciary third party to make sure everything happens legally and correctly. Yeah. And usually are the only people in the room that actually understand how that process runs end to end.
Yeah, we make sure the buyer has, all their loan documents, all their paperwork in, before we can transfer that over. We have to make sure their loan is funded, that they put in the rest of their cash to close, and that, the title documents are all signed properly and that everything's good to go, so that we can literally just switch.
It seems to me from just watching the process for so many years that you quite literally could write loan documents, but there, as far as I know, I've never seen any place where there's like an escrow officer school or like a degree or something. I mean, I imagine you have to meet certain criteria to get the license, but as far as I can tell, it's almost like a tradition that's like passed on from escrow officer to assistant. Is that correct? Or how do you actually go learn how to be an escrow officer?
You can. There actually is, there are classes you could take. You can get certifications. I just got a mobile home certification. So
there are school online, like absolutely. The way we get our license
they have,
update.
Pierce College has Escrow 101. You go there and you learn how to do escrow, and they have, and you can continue on, you can keep going. You can learn basics. You can get a basics, and then move on into more complicated transaction situations, and further on processing and stuff.
So does it require a different escrow license for you to sell a mobile home than a single family home than a commercial building?
No, all those things are the same. I mean, I got a mobile home certification because I had no idea how to do them, and they're completely different than a residential sale or residential income or commercial. I mean, commercial is basically the same for escrow.
Amazing. And then when you first got started, was it, for me, real estate was always something that I had just had an interest in learning because my dad had been in real estate. I grew up around it, but I really just sort of expected I'd work a couple summers and then I was going to go on and be a rock star and make gazillions of dollars. So real estate was never anything I had a long-term plan, but I always had a very solid plan that I wanted to learn the family business. And because I just figured that at some point you always are going to need to, you're either renting or buying, or, you always need a place to live basically. And so I figured it would just be a really good education. What got you into the world of escrow? What was your tipping point?
Well, I was actually in school. I was pre-med and needed to kind of decide, what do I want to do? I can't just keep, not working. Working part-time and going to school full-time wasn't really paying my rent in Los Angeles by myself, so I had to kind of figure it out. So I got my boyfriend at the time. His mom was a realtor in Beverly Hills, and she knew this lady that who'd been doing her escrows, and so she helped me get a receptionist job there, and I literally worked from the bottom up.
As a receptionist?
I started as a receptionist.
Wow. Was that out here?
No, Beverly Hills.
Oh, Beverly Hills.
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
And that was in the early 90s. So working out of it was in the William Morris building. I did that for a year, and then I went to a different escrow company after that, and I was there for 5 years in Beverly Hills, and then went to, and that's when I ended up at Fred Sands.
So
it was
Fred
Westland
Sands, Beverly
Escrow
Hills.
at the time, yeah.
And how did you wind up in Malibu?
I was working in the Brentwood office, and my escrow officer started a branch down in Del Mar or something, and so I was there and got an escrow officer that we kind of clashed a little bit, and so I just said, I don't know if I really want to be permanently in an office, and so she had me kind of floating around. They did floating staff support. And so I went to Santa Monica for a little while, and I went to Beverly Hills for a little while, and the Palisades, and I just kind of went wherever they needed help, extra staff support. And that's how I ended up out here in Malibu in like 98 or 99 maybe.
And at that point, had you actually been to then like an escrow school or start taking classes, or that was all
No,
just
it was
working your way
literally
up?
on the job training. Like my first thing they gave me was a closing, which I was like, they were like, call the title company and get, you used to write the title charges down on a sheet at that time. We also used to smoke in the office, but it was legal at the time, but that was just a whole other story. But it's just really funny. But yeah, like that was how I started, just getting figures from title companies, and then incorporating in what they already had. And like we had to write it on a sheet and then use an adding machine to like run a tape, because we didn't have like internet back then. We didn't have computers. Like we literally typed our escrow instructions on a typewriter.
What would you do then for the actual recording? Like, would the title company come pick up a package of papers from you back then?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we would, put it in an envelope. They'd pick it up, take it to the county recorder's office. And when they got confirmation, they would call us, give us the figures over the phone. And, they did like drafts they did wire instructions and drafts. And it was a little bit of a different time then.
And so is the process now all online? Like, do they actually come pick up a package of papers from you, or do you just email them this huge PDF, and then somebody from title still has to take something down to the recorder's office, right?
No, they're done.
They don't do that anymore?
Some do still. Some do still do the hard copies to the county recorder's office, but most of them are set up to scan the documents electronically now. But they have to have the originals at title to scan, because they're basically certifying that they have the originals in hand and they're scanning them. And I don't know what they do with them before or after that, if they put them in a bag and actually send them to the county recorder. I don't know if they shred them. I don't know what happens.
And then at what point does money actually change hands? Like, at what point does the buyer's money move to the seller's account?
As soon as we have confirmation, and then we have the money from the title company. So if the buyer has financing, their loan will fund to the title company, and then the title company will make any payoffs that have to get made, pay any property taxes, basically whatever needs to happen in order for the buyer to get clear title. They'll pay off all that, and then they send us whatever's left over, and then that's the seller's proceeds. Anything over and above the buyer's, closing funds.
So the title company physically has that money, they make all the payments, and then
Yeah.
they send the remainder to you to disperse?
Exactly. Yeah. So like, I may be waiting for like $300,000 from title to add to what I have in there of the buyer's earnest money deposit plus their, closing funds that they put in. And, that sum total is the balance of what I need to disperse the file. I pay commissions, do the seller's proceeds, pay for all the reports, and retrofit any work that's done.
Do you actually create the new grant deed, or is that something that title does? So you actually create it and title just records it?
Mm-hmm.
So they physically, or they used to at least physically take it down, now they send that in, or is that?
Yeah, so I keep it in, I'll keep it in a folder with all the other documents that go to title at closing, and then I just send them one package at the end.
So we were talking about this a little bit before we started recording, and I almost feel like it would be its own episode just to go through all the nuances of cybercrime and like how that's changed your industry and is changing our industry. But what would be, if you could sort of recap the talk you guys gave yesterday of some of the highlights, what things will people actually receive via email from you, and what things should they never respond to, or what information should they never give online if they get, a phishing email from a very smart criminal that knows how to ask all those right questions?
Yeah, well, okay, so a lot of times when a person gets an email that looks like we're asking for something, it usually looks fishy. There's a lot of typos in it. It looks funky. And most people will call and say, like, I got this weird email, and I'm just like, delete it. Just delete it.
So anything coming from you, you're not going to be asking for any of that via email. You're not asking for social security numbers or them to provide bank information, or they're sending that directly to you. You're not requesting that, or how does that work?
So we have this really new, this really great software. It's a new escrow program. And we send a link to the buyer, the seller, the agents, like the lender, anybody involved in the transaction will get a link to our portal, and you can go. So like if you get a link, if you sign up for it, like all of your escrows will be in there, and you can click on one and you can get anything that we've put in there, the NHD, the prelim, anything in there. It'll say it's gone out, when it went out, wire instructions went out. But specifically with regard to wire instructions going to the buyer, I call the buyer and let them know that the wire instructions are coming.
And then send it, so they have a specific time
and it's
frame.
sent secure.
It is a secure email.
Oh, yeah.
So they have to physically do something to.
They have to set up a password usually in order to get it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So anything that you actually communicate is really pretty safe then.
Oh yeah.
And
just the levels of encryptions that we have to use, even if we didn't send it through a secure portal and I just sent it by email, I can encrypt the email so that they have to still use a password.
What about, like, where does all that information get stored then from the parent company? Like you hear that, Costco got, cyber cracked and, 4 billion records were released. Like, where is your information ultimately stored? Is there a hub at Chartwell?
I think each office has its own secure server.
So you have your own secure, so just your information is on that.
Yeah.
So
like we each have our own network or something.
So what are some of the cautionary tales you've seen in terms of some of the cybercrime and just the ways that you've seen that used against people? Just some basic examples of what people might see done or what to watch for.
Mainly, like if you get an email that just looks weird,
physically just looks weird, or it's asking for information.
It has a strange appearance. It has a lot of typos in it. Asking for something that seems like it might be something. If the bottom line is, if you get a request from anybody asking for a wire transfer, call that person. Call your agent. Say, I got this email. It's asking for a wire transfer.
And that's mostly what it is. It's just trying to get.
Google the escrow company. Like, look it up online, and then call that number. Don't call the number from the email, because it could be a bad number. But I've seen like literally bad copy and paste jobs. Like somebody will take a wire instruction from a legit place and then just white out the wire instructions for that place and type in their own wire instructions. I've seen them handwritten, and people will still wire the money there. But
wow,
they're like, oh well, I'm sure it's fine.
So what happens at that point then? Like if money actually gets wired that's intended for a escrow to a criminal, once that money hits their account, what recourse does a consumer have at that point?
You can immediately call the bank and ask them to recall the wire transfer. It may not happen. They might not be able to do it, but it's worth asking for sure.
So once the train's left the station, they can't really stop it.
A wire transfer is the same as cash.
It's the same as cash.
And it's a same day transfer, but sometimes if you can get it in time, they might be able to recall it.
So what I heard in your talk yesterday mentioned that at the point that money's actually been stolen, that becomes like an FBI case pretty much at that point. So there's really nothing you guys can do at that point. You're not party to that crime.
Right.
Even though it was done in the name of escrow. Escrow doesn't have anything to do with it.
But if I did something, or there was some sort of breach, then it could be potentially something that we would have to deal with. Like,
So if they actually hacked into your account and the
if they
email
hacked
really
in,
went out,
got my banking information
Yeah.
and stole someone's money, that would be a different situation completely.
and I imagine the parent company would have to carry insurance for that purpose these days. Then.
We have tons of insurance for that specific thing.
I see. All right, so in a nutshell, essentially, if anyone were ever to receive an email that they felt like was asking for very personal and delicate information, they should always reach out and contact you and make
Yeah.
sure that you actually sent out that request.
Yeah.
It sounds like the easiest way to stay safe.
Yeah, protect yourself. You know, I mean,
And any email coming from you that's asking for wiring instruction or asking for money to be sent is going to be encrypted. You're going to have to go through a few processes to open that and to send you that information.
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, then moving on from there, people always ask me, how real estate fees work, but they also ask, how to escrow and title fees work and what are closing costs essentially. So just for some round numbers in that, if you had a $1 million escrow and you're selling $1 million home, what would the rough fees look like for escrow and title, and how do you calculate those basically?
So most companies are now charging $2 per thousand of the sales price plus a base fee of anywhere between $150 to $250, and then or more.
That would be for buyer and seller separately.
Each side
So $2
separately,
per
yeah.
side.
So if you're a buyer or a seller and you're wondering what your costs are going to be, like for escrow, the standard is anywhere between. I mean, it just varies across the board, but probably around $2 per thousand plus whatever their base fee is, like between $150 and $275 or $300 or $375. I can't quote other people's fees, but there's that, and plus there's a la carte fees. So if you're getting financing, there's a fee for that because escrow then has to coordinate all the funding. They coordinate loan documents, they coordinate funding, they provide the lender with all of the things that they need in order to get to that point where they can fund, like the title report, they want copies of the signed contract, they want, signed copies of paperwork and receipts for money and all that stuff. So we get that all over to them so that they can do their job. So then...
What do you do with, I'd imagine there's a lot of miscellaneous costs that are coming in even at the very end, like messenger fees, and I guess not so much now that you're emailing.
We just kind of ballpark it. We'll put in like a fee. We'll put in an estimate of like $50 for messengers, or out here in Malibu, we don't do a lot of messengering because it is so expensive. Like just to send a package to Beverly Hills, it's like $85. So we just put in a pad. We put in like $50 for messenger overnights, and we just try to overnight as cheaply as possible so we don't have to pass on the expense. So we have bulk rates with different service companies who provide overnight services.
And definitely from an industry standard, one of the reasons we have always loved working with you at any of the different companies you've been with is just your knowledge and service is just exceptional. You always have gone
Thank
so
you.
far overboard, and anyone we've ever brought you, we always have such a high confidence level that if we hand you an escrow, they will be taken care of, an absolute white glove, 10-star, service. Are there any different things people should consider when they're choosing an escrow company that would differentiate? Like I've had escrow companies been forced on me that have been so bad they've literally ruined transactions, and that is why we fight so hard to use you, is because we know that will make buyer, seller, and everyone involved so much happier because the process will go so much better.
Yeah.
But is there any special designation or anything you would carry that would help people identify the quality of service, or is that just an individual standard?
It's just an individual standard. I just do what I think I should do. Like if it's easy for me to order a home warranty from online, just type in the information from the contract and just confirm it. I send it out for everybody to see. You know, if they want to add something, we can add it. If they want to take something away, we can take something away. Like, a lot of companies don't do that. They don't order the home warranty anymore, and it's so simple. Right. But, you know, when you get a high volume, it's not so easy to cater to that. I mean, when you have an assistant and a transaction coordinator, I can see why escrow would be not wanting to order, you know, the natural hazard disclosure or like the home warranty and stuff, because we don't go there. We don't know what the appliances are, but it's easy enough to just ask, you know, what do you want covered on the home warranty? We're going to get that ordered for you.
Right. And with your more recent move to Chartwell, we're ecstatic. But was there anything specific for you that you saw in Chartwell that made you want to make the move?
They seem, the company culture was like one of the main drivers in that was, you know, they want you to feel supported. You know, if you need help, you get help. And I've experienced that. Like, anytime I've ever needed help, you know, with anything, like, there are resources. There's people I can call. I don't know everything. Things come up and I just don't know sometimes, you know, specific things, you know, and they have people who can help you with that. Like, I have to be neutral. If you're asking me to do something that's not above board, like, I'll say, like, I can't do that.
Right.
Yeah. Like, it's better if it comes from you. And you guys don't know, like, if you're asking me, like, oh, well, can you call this person and, you know, find out, like, you know, this or that? Like, I'll be like, I can't really do that. Like, call the buyer's agent and find out when they're gonna, you know, what do we need to do to get the contingencies removed? I'm like, I can't. It's out of my kitchen.
Yeah.
Like, I just say I can't, you know, like, most things I'm like, I'm in it. I'm all in, but, you know, some things I literally can't do, because it would be weird if I did, and it would seem like I was being biased, and I can't, you know,
All right. So for you, what would be your favorite part of the job?
I feel like my role in the transaction is more of like a partner. I'm like a partner to everybody in the transaction. Like, I'm not there to settle any disagreements. It's more like I just work in partnership with everyone to get to a successful closing. You know, like, I help you, I help the other agent, I help the buyer, I help the seller, I help everybody. I have a fiduciary responsibility to everybody involved in the transaction, whether I'm an affiliate or not. You know, an escrow holder is extremely neutral.
That makes sense. You have to maintain neutrality, even if the buyer was moving money that, you know, looked like it could be a bunch of drug money from Mexico. You wouldn't be able to say that.
No, we do. We have to check that too.
Oh yeah,
we do.
You check drug money?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, like,
how do you even check that?
Well, let me tell you. So if a buyer is purchasing a property in Malibu, say $5 million all cash through a company, there's a CFPB, there's a form they have to fill out, and it's through the title company, and it's a federal form, and we literally have to have the buyer fill it out with all of their personal information, passports, with photocopies of their passports, social security numbers, and it goes to the government. It goes to the
forms do.
Yeah.
Huh. But you're not like a bank in the sense that you'd have to see, you know, money's been in accounts for a certain time before it gets sent in.
That part, no. But part of that package is that we have to give copies of the receipts to the
lender, if there's a lender.
To the lender if there's a lender, but more specifically to it's part of the title package that goes to the Department of the Treasury.
I just had a quick question about title then. So I know that you guys obviously work very closely with title companies, but you know, there are escrow companies I worked with that have been specifically title escrow companies, and other title companies that are, you know, seem to not care who they're working with as escrow. And I've always actually found that you know, your independent process has seemed to work better. And I don't know if that's just you or if that is something about the process that works differently. But what would be the difference as far as the two?
I've never worked at a title company escrow, but from what I understand, they deal with more of a volume, and it's less expensive because, from what I understand, I don't know 100%, but from what I understand, they get their money from the title premiums, and so they can do the escrow at a discounted rate.
I see. Well, that would make sense then, because the level of service is very different.
In terms of money only, but I've not had a choice before. When I bought my house in June, we used a title company escrow, and they were really great. I mean, I don't know that it's.
So it comes down to the person.
It comes down to the person every time.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter where they work. If you find somebody you like, just stay with them.
Well, thanks so much for letting us interview you. I feel like
Yeah,
there's a
thanks for
million more
having me.
things I should have asked you, but I appreciate you making the time, and you are definitely one of the smartest, nicest, most professional people I've ever had the pleasure of dealing
thank
with in
you.
real estate land. So I've enjoyed our
Likewise, for
25
sure.
years together.
Thank you.
And thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I'm Tony Mark.
And I'm Russell Grether of the Mark Grether Group.
Thank you for joining us on the Malibu podcast.
Malibu, Malibu.